I'm Rhana. I'm an educator with the North Carolina Aquarium on Roanoke Island, but I'm not at the aquarium today. I'm in my own backyard, and with this series, we're encouraging you to explore your own backyard or other natural area near you. Today's episode is on native plants. What does it mean to be a native plant? Well, there's a phrase around here on the Outer Banks that you are not a native until you've had several generations living here. And the same could kind of be said about native plants. What makes it a native? Well, usually they're plants that are built for an area, and they are an important part of an ecosystem. And so I want to show you a couple of native plants that are very well built for living here. The first one I want to show you is called Lyerly Sage. This is a common plant that we see in the maritime forests, and it is very well adapted for living here on the Outer Banks. You can see the purple flowers. It blooms in the springtime, and this is an important food source for hummingbirds. They in turn pollinate this plant. What I want to direct your attention to, though, is if you look at the leaves and the stems, you can see how hairy they are. That allows this plant to avoid getting salt spray and wind, the two problems that are really a big deal for plants that live around here, and keep it away from your tender leaves. The next plant I want to show you is called green and gold. Again, a woodland plant you might find up and down in our maritime forests. What's neat about it, again, it's blooming in the springtime. It is a pollinator favorite. But look at the leaves. They're very, very fuzzy. Again, an adaptation for living here on the Outer Banks. This is called silkgrass, and what's kind of neat about it is that it loves to grow underneath high pines. You'll find them in kind of dry woodland areas. And in this fall, late summer, fall, there'll be a spike with a little yellow flower. Again, very important to pollinators, a source for nectar, and then they in turn fertilize the plant. But look at the leaves. They're fuzzy. So what does that tell us about the environment these plants live in? Again, these are native plants. Here on the Outer Banks, we have issues with high wind and salt spray. So if you have high wind, that often will dry a plant out. If you have salt spray getting on leaves, that will hurt the plant. So these plants have fuzzy. That's one of the adaptations. Let's look at another adaptation that some of these plants might have. This is called live oak. And this is a plant very well adapted for life along the mid-Atlantic all the way south along the coast. It is a wonderful part of our ecosystem. Like all oaks, it's an important food source for a number of caterpillars that we have. It's a host plant. It also provides acorns for a lot of our mammals and birds. And so it is an important part of the ecosystem. How is it adapted for the Outer Banks? Look at these glossy, shiny leaves. Again, that allows that plant to get the salt water to wash off after a rainstorm. This is another native plant that we find here in our maritime forest, especially down by the sound side. This is called Yopon holly, Ilex vomitoria. Talk about a name. Well, this plant is very well adapted. Like other hollies, it has these glossy leaves. Again, hollies, they are an important part of the environment of our ecosystem here, our maritime forest, because it is a host plant to some butterflies. Again, in the springtime when they bloom, they have nectar sources for our pollinators. Look at these glossy leaves. That's an adaptation for living here. This is called red bay. And what's neat about it is that, again, as a host plant, it is the host plant to our Palmetes swallowtail butterfly. Again, what do we mean by host plant? The caterpillar would eat the leaves and then turn into a butterfly later, so it's an important part of that life cycle. But again, it is built for being here on the Outer Banks. Look at the glossy leaves. So what are the two strategies that we looked at? We looked at fuzzy leaves and waxy leaves. Both of those two strategies are an important way for our native plants that are built here, an important part of our ecosystem. Allows them to avoid the salt spray and the high wind events that we have here on the Outer Banks. Well, that concludes today's episode of Backyard Biology. We encourage you to go outside and explore your own environment. Look for some native plants in your yard. Maybe consider planting some native plants to help out the pollinators and the wildlife that you find in your neighborhood.